51, 14-year-old Olive Oatman was heading west with her family when their wagon train was attacked. Taken captive and traded, she was eventually adopted by the Mojave people, who marked her chin with their blue tattoo of kinship. Years later, American authorities
Hear the wind! It carries our call! Stand with me! Stand for the land that raised us!
The earth remembers every step. It has waited for our return. Listen, and it will guide you.
We are still here, unbroken. No chain, no border, no...
Across boundless grasslands, riders thundered toward the horizon. Far at sea, Columbus envisioned unknown worlds. His ships slipped through hidden stone gates and braved storms that shook the very sky, steering for distant wonders. On faraway shores, new eyes watched from
the world 10,000 years ago was an extremely fascinating place. Already by this time, our species had spread out to nearly every corner of the world. The days of the last glacial period were over and our species was thriving in its wake. Complex technologies were being developed, symbolism was a part of daily life, and the beginning of agriculture was well underway. It is such an amazing time because we can really see that humanity and ultimately civilization were getting their foothold. Today we will be talking about all of the amazing things that were happening around 10,000 years ago. Since our discoveries don't all conveniently line up exactly at this date, I will be extending this time frame 1,000 years on both ends. This will allow us to get a much better idea of what on earth we were doing during this time. There are tons of discoveries and unique sites from this period, and not all of them could be mentioned. If you know of something not mentioned during this period, please leave a comment down below so we can all learn from them. Now, without further ado, let's get into the video. To understand the world 10,000 years ago, we must first gain an understanding of what was happening with the climate. The last glacial period, often referred to as the Ice Age, was an exceptionally cold time starting around 100,000 years ago. During this time, modern humans, aka Homo sapiens, had already spread out of Africa roughly 70,000 years ago, and by about 20,000 years ago, we were just about everywhere. As modern humans spread, they interbred with local hominin populations including Neanderthals, Denisovans, and likely yet unknown hominins. Much of the DNA from these hybridization events was quickly bred out of these populations. But the DNA that was useful was kept, and some of it even remains in modern populations. By around 20,000 years ago, the last glacial period had reached its coldest extent, with ice sheets extending over much of the northern hemisphere. Though glacial periods do not last forever, and due to the Milankovitch cycle, changes in the Earth's orbit and orientation to the Sun meant that an interglacial was coming. Ice sheets declined as temperatures rose, and by 11,700 years ago, the glacial period was over. The Pleistocene period had come to an end and the Holocene period was beginning. Along with the changing climate, many of the megafauna species which thrived during the Pleistocene no longer reigned. The cause for their extinction has long been argued, though most can agree that two factors were primarily responsible: the changing climate and human activities. Which factor was more prominent certainly varied region to region, though it is a topic for another day. Along with the changing climate, the melting glaciers caused the sea level to rise by around 7.5 meters or 24 feet in only 160 years. This submerged massive amounts of land, though the sea level 10,000 years ago was still much lower than it is today. This allowed humans to keep living on many now submerged lands around the world. One of these areas is the first area we will be talking about: Doggerland. Doggerland was a massive area between the British Isles and northern Europe which was connected 10,000 years ago. Here the Maglemosian culture thrived. These people were the direct descendants of Magdalenian populations who once hunted now extinct megafauna including mammoth and cave bear. However, with the changing climate, the specialized hunting of large animals or large groups of animals became less viable, and these populations had to focus on a broader hunter-gatherer way of life. This is what researchers refer to as the Mesolithic. As the glaciers melted and steppe and tundra became lush forests and wetlands, people focused on exploiting a wide array of plant and animal resources. They created complicated tools out of stone microliths as well as bone and antler. With them, they hunted deer, caught rabbits, and speared fish. They also made axes, picks, and digging sticks out of antler and flint. The first definite weapons of war came into existence during this time in the form of drilled round stones that were almost certainly used as mace heads. Some may have lived in settled villages, though most appear to have been quite nomadic. Various animals were hunted by these people, including bison, aurochs, deer, and especially reindeer. Reindeer populations still ranged far and wide throughout northern Europe during this time. A recent discovery may shed light on how these people hunted such mobile animals. A rock wall nearly a kilometer long was discovered off of the northern coast of Germany in the Baltic Sea. Constructed 10,000 years ago, it was likely used to guide reindeer or other animals to ambush points or traps. Various cultures from more recent times in Siberia and the Arctic have constructed relatively similar structures. The Inuit would often guide caribou into water where they could easily be picked off by people in kayaks. It is possible that these people were using this wall to coordinate similar hunts. To the north, in the newly emerging lands of Scandinavia, a new culture emerged 10,000 years ago. It was assumed for many years that the regions of the Arctic Circle in northern Europe would have been uninhabitable during this time. New discoveries have shown that the people of the Kamsa culture were quickly able to migrate into this region, most likely with the use of watercraft. They even made it to the province of Finnmark over 10,000 years ago. They seem to have relied on many coastal resources such as shellfish and marine mammals. Some even appear to have ventured deep within the mountainous interior of Norway. Carved rock art has been found during this period depicting a variety of naturalistic images. Moving down to the Iberian Peninsula, we find the quite unique Azilian culture. This culture and Iberia in general are interesting because they retained a high level of ancestry from the Goyet Q2 cluster, which were some of the first modern humans to inhabit Europe after the Neanderthals. These people also carved extremely well-made harpoons and were obsessed with painting and engraving rocks. These people mainly consumed deer, goat, and seafood near the coast. Honey also seems to have been favored during this time, telling by a few very interesting depictions in rock art. Another cave depicts what appears to have been a battle between a group of archers. 3 archers are drawn and circled by a group of 4. This is quite interesting as evidence of violence from this time period is quite rare, especially in cave art. Moving around the Mediterranean, both the Italian peninsula and the Balkans were home to late Epigravettian cultures. These people were carrying on aspects of the Gravettian culture which first appeared around 30,000 years ago. They utilized microliths and backed blades to create deadly composite tools. With them, they hunted reindeer, aurochs, and wild boar. They also heavily exploited marine resources, including hard-to-catch species such as grouper. This may suggest that they were using some kind of watercraft. At Magura Cave in modern Bulgaria, many strange and very stylized paintings can be found which date to between 8 and 10,000 years old. Out of all the figures, animals, people, and supposed deities can be seen. The human figures are quite interesting, with many wielding bows, and one figure even seems to have an arrow through its midsection. Some of the scenes have been interpreted as hunts, while others appear to have been religious ceremonies. All of the cultures I have mentioned so far belong to the genetic group known as the Western hunter-gatherers. These people were undoubtedly European, though they looked quite different from the modern inhabitants of Western Europe. Their skin ranged from olive to black, and their hair was typically dark, while their eyes were typically blue. Modern Europeans look so different from these people because their genetics are mostly from later migrations of Anatolian farmers and Indo-European steppe herders which came to Europe long after 10,000 years ago. 10,000 years ago, the ancestors of the steppe herders were also hunter-gatherers, named the Eastern hunter-gatherers. They had fairly light skin with dark hair and mostly brown eyes. Their range extended from northern Asia to Eastern Europe, though most of Eastern Europe was actually a mix between Western and Eastern hunter-gatherers. The Swiderian culture was made up of a mix of these populations and was centered in the lands of modern Poland and the southern Baltic region. They were semi-settled hunter-gatherers living in small settlements besides lakes, rivers, and marshes. They made quite impressive stone tools, including large tanked blades and bone points which had stone blades inserted into them. These stone blades were removed from cores with a pressure technique which appears to have originated far to the northeast, all the way in modern Mongolia around 20,000 years ago. With their deadly points, they extensively hunted deer and moose, likely with the help of hunting dogs. I just found out by researching this video that the animal we call moose, the Europeans call elk. Apparently the European settlers who first came to North America confused American elk or wapiti with European elk, likely because most of them had never actually seen a moose. So the settlers called the wapiti elk and took the Native American name for moose to describe European elk. Of course, other European languages have different words for this animal, but most are cognates from the original Indo-European word for the animal. Speaking of animals, let's take a break from the video to talk about today's sponsor, Beastlord: The New Land. Beastlord is an animal-themed strategy game for your mobile device. As a lord, you must harness the power of various beasts in order to expand your territory, collect resources, and acquire new beasts. Along the way, you will learn interesting real-world facts about your animals. There are over 500 animals in the game which you can acquire. The game features a wonderful realistic painting style for all the animals and art. By using your animals, you can expand and cultivate new areas. You can receive the Lion, the ultimate combat hero, on your second day of logging in. Lion is your go-to melee hero with serious combat skills and some cool command tricks. Perfect for beginners because it pumps up your whole beast squad. Plus, early on, it helps crank up your squad's expedition capacity big time. In Beastlord, lions are like squad captains. When you put one in your team, it amps up everyone's expedition skills. As it levels up, it beefs up the team's attack and defense, making your beast squad super effective. And hey, when the lion's leading the pack, its own attack power shoots through the roof too. This game is seriously really fun to play, and I found it satisfying to clear out the world and make it my own territory. Use the link in the description to download the game and use code BL777 to get a head start in the game. Huge thanks to Beastlord: The New Land for sponsoring the channel, and I hope you all go out and give it a try. It's free after all. Now, let's get back to the video. Further to the east, on either side of the Volga River, lived cultures such as the Butovo and Shigir people. These people were mostly Eastern hunter-gatherers genetically and appear to have been the ancestors of the Indo-Europeans. They used relatively similar technology to the Swiderians but had their own unique cultural variations. They thrived in the post-glacial landscape, which included abundant lakes and developing woodlands. The Shigir people inhabited the eastern Ural Mountains and are primarily known from an interesting wooden figure found at one of their sites. The Shigir idol was discovered in many fragments in the Middle Urals. It is thought that it may have stood more than 5 meters or 16 feet tall. It depicts a three-dimensional man's face on its tip, while its body has 7 additional faces and geometric carvings. The figure was made from a quite large tree which was cut down, split, and then shaped, presumably using polished adzes and tools made from the jaws of beaver also found in the region. The sculpture is typically interpreted as a symbolic object, a part of the spiritual world of these people. Such interpretations seem likely when compared to the highly symbolic totem poles of the Haida people of Canada. The Europe of 10,000 years ago was an amazing place full of blossoming cultures and new technologies. Though these people were still hunter-gatherers, they were finding new ways to exploit their environments, and some were even able to settle down. One can imagine how fascinating it would have been to witness a tribe of these great wild people celebrate a cultural event or perform a shamanistic ritual. There's far more to be said about Europe from this time, and there were cultures I left out, but we should move on to discuss the tremendous advancements that were occurring in Western Asia. Long before 10,000 years ago, Western Asia was developing not only agriculture but also complex architecture. As far back as 23,000 years ago, the small-scale cultivation of edible grasses was being conducted on the shores of the Sea of Galilee in northern Israel. The seeds from these wild grasses could be ingested outright, but by grinding them up in basalt mortars, they were able to create flour which was much easier to digest. These people also ate many wild fruits, nuts, and hunted gazelle, deer, aurochs, wild boar, and waterfowl. The Natufian culture appeared around 15,000 years ago and took advantage of the abundance of food. Though these people were still hunter-gatherers, they were able to become fully or partially sedentary. This is significant because the vast majority of hunter-gatherers must constantly be on the move in order to find more resources. The new free time and ability to stay put led these populations to build permanent shelters. They constructed complex settlements out of a variety of materials, including limestone slabs, shaped rocks, and mud bricks. With their architectural prowess, they even made areas specifically for storing large amounts of food and large structures that have been interpreted as symbolic. They also created cemeteries and an abundance of artwork, including carved stone and bone objects. One of these objects, named the Ain Sakri Lovers, is approximately 11,000 years old and is the oldest known representation of two people engaged in sexual intercourse. These Natufian populations were clearly on their way to developing agriculture over a long period of time, and a sudden change in the climate may have actually forced them into it. One theory suggests that the Younger Dryas, which was a cold and arid period, vastly reduced the amount of wild cereals available in the region, perhaps forcing Natufian people to go out of their way to plant and care for seeds. This is an interesting idea, though regardless, agriculture and the domestication of animals would first appear between 11 and 12,000 years ago. By around 11,500 years ago, emmer wheat, einkorn wheat, hulled barley, peas, lentils, bitter vetch, chickpeas, and flax were cultivated in the wider Levant region. They appear virtually simultaneously, though some crops were favored over others. Wheat in particular was favored because it could be turned into bread, beer, and gruel. It could also be combined with other crops like peas and lentils to make soups. Around this same time, many animal species were also domesticated. These people already had domesticated dogs, which were domesticated well over 20,000 years ago. Perhaps understanding that animals could be tamed, they realized instead of systematically hunting their prey, they could keep them and breed them. Pigs, goats, and sheep were domesticated around 11,000 years ago in Mesopotamia, and cattle were domesticated around 10,500 years ago in Turkey. Unlike their Natufian forebears, they now did not need to hunt, though they likely still did to supplement their diet. Through their genius, they had tamed everything they needed to live a permanently settled life. By 11,000 years ago, permanent settlement at Jericho began, a quite famous city that is still inhabited today. Numerous circular dwellings were made of clay and straw and featured hearths within homes. Complex artwork was made depicting human faces, and some actual human skulls were covered with plaster and given shells for eyes. This appears to have been a form of ancestor worship. Around the entire settlement was made a massive stone wall 3.6 meters or 12 feet high and around 1.8 meters or 6 feet wide at its base. A stone tower built on the wall was 8.5 meters or 28 feet tall with 22 stone steps leading up to the top. The wall and tower may have been used for defense against enemies and or floodwaters. These structures may have taken 100 men more than 100 days to construct. The population at Jericho during this time is debated, with